What purpose does it serve that when millions of people have voted, then 5 people will come to decide either in favor or against the decision of millions of people? Is that democracy?
Now, that question got me thinking, because when we talk about 2027, everybody is talking about who is going to win. Tinubu, Obi, Atiku, the opposition, coalitions. But let me ask you something. After me and you and millions of other Nigerians have voted, who makes sure that our vote actually gets where it is supposed to go? Because voting is one thing, making sure that vote is protected all the way to the final result is another thing. And this is where what Mike Igini is saying becomes very interesting. Listen to this.
This is very key. Saving African democracy beyond the election will require that we must pay serious attention to the EMBs we have in Africa, the election management bodies. I say this because the arrogance of political office holders is based on the fact that they can control the EMB. Once you cut the supply of the source of supply of arrogance, they will be like lily pod. I presided over election in 7 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In a particular state, a politician declared publicly before election, 48 hours to election, that by Saturday, by 12 o'clock, 2 p.m., the result would have won the election. Because historically, they were used to writing election result. But I was clear that under our watch, that the will of the people is what will govern in that election. In that election, that politician could not even make it. How much more for the party was even campaigning for? The professors who were used to write the results, we proceeded against them and got all of them jailed. As we are heading for election, whether in Africa or that part of the country, in Nigeria, as I speak to you, politicians are already going to the university communities to reach out to the professors, to the academics. And of course, they try to use the federal agencies that INEC will normally use as collation officers and returning officers. They are already reaching out to them. Final point. No credible election can take place in the African continent when, for instance, in Nigeria, you have an Electoral Act that says that a ballot paper that does not bear the serial number of INEC shall be taken into account. What election are you expecting to happen? 2, we have in the current 2026 Electoral Act a provision that says that a presiding officer, a work collation officer, a returning officer that fails to comply with INEC regulation and guideline under section 133, 38, it shall not be a ground for nullifying election. And furthermore, that such individuals, when those matters are challenged in court, it shall not be necessary. It shall not be necessary to bring them to court. Yet, we are going for 2027 election. Violating, ignoring the first alteration initiated by President Goodluck Jonathan.
Quick pause here. Do well to like this video as you are watching. It really helps us a lot. And if you want to stay updated on trendy topics like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss any updates. Now, think about what he just said. Imagine you just go to your polling unit, you vote, they count the votes in front of you, you see the results and you leave. At that point, you probably feel like, okay, I have done my part. But what happens after you leave? What happens to that result? Who is handling it? Who is making sure the rules are followed? That is the part of elections we don't always think about, because most of us are focused on the politicians, who is popular, who has supporters, who is forming a coalition, who is going to win. But the system carrying that vote from the polling unit to the final result matters too. And according to Igini, that is one of the areas Nigerians need to pay very close attention to.
With respect to judiciary, that occupies a distinct but complementary role to political parties, it should be noted that the first early sign of the subversion of democracy is the failure of the judiciary to stand tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law, because the greatest contribution of the Western world to attaining democracy is the idea of the rule of law, and that every law that governs a process must be adhered to. In our country here in Nigeria, I have said it clearly, that if democracy will die in Nigeria, it will die because of we lawyers and our colleagues in the bench, and that the remains of democracy will be put at the doorstep of judiciary in our country. Because historically, They have never stood tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law.
And this is where things get even more serious, because imagine there's a problem with an election. Where does the argument eventually go? The courts. So you have the people conducting the election on one side, and then you have the judiciary potentially deciding what happens when that election is challenged. That is why Igini is putting so much attention on the judiciary. And I'm not saying you have to agree with everything this man is saying, but this is something we should actually be talking about before 2027, not after the results are announced. And then he made another point that I think is very important, because you might say, okay, we have BVAS, we have IReV, we have technology now. So what is the problem? Well, according to Igini, technology isn't the whole problem. The bigger problem is the person operating the system. Listen.
Whether political parties participate in 2027 election is also going to be determined by courts. That is how the level of retrogression of our democracy. I spent 10 years with my colleagues in the INEC. We established systems. We developed tools from the carried out to the current BVAS and IReV to address historical challenges of election service delivery. The greatest threat to our democracy today is the human agency, sabotage, compromise.
And honestly, that is something everybody can understand. You can buy the best phone in the world, but if the person using it doesn't want to use it properly, what is the point? That's basically the argument he's making here. You can have BVAS, you can have IReV. In fact, you can create all these rules, but if the people inside the system don't follow those rules, the technology alone cannot save the election. And that is where 2027 becomes really interesting, because we are already seeing people positioning themselves for that election. We are seeing political movements, we are seeing alliances, we are seeing people talking about who can defeat who. But while all of that is happening, there is another conversation Nigerians need to have. Can we trust the process itself? Because if the process is not trusted, whoever eventually wins is going to face questions.
So you could see that there's no accountability. A country where there's no accountability, another process there will be no accountability. And the worst thing, that you have in the statutes a provision to the effect that a ballot paper that do not have the relevant security features of the ballot shall be counted. That's what are you talking about?
And this is why that section 138 conversation is important, because if somebody is supposed to follow a rule during an election and something goes wrong, who is actually held responsible? That is the billion-dollar question that it deserves an honest answer. And honestly, that is what I want Nigerians to think about. Not just who am I voting for? Is it Peter Obi, Atiku, Sowore, or Tinubu? But also, who is protecting my vote after I cast it? Because your PVC is not the end of the process. You vote, your vote is counted, the result is recorded, then it moves from there. So if you really care about the person you are voting for, you should care about what happens to that vote after you leave the polling unit.
My clarion call to Nigeria. Nigerians, you have a responsibility to take over your country. 2027 elections coming. Go get your PVC. Go to the polling units. In numbers, after the result has been counted, make sure whoever you want to vote for. All of you must proceed to the world level, from the world level to the last point of collation, because the will of the people must govern. That is the only way we can sustain democracy.
And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from everything we have had. 2027 is still ahead of us. We don't know who will win. We don't know what alliances will be formed. We don't know what the final political battle will look like. But one thing is already clear. The election isn't only about the people on the ballot. It is also about the system carrying your vote from that small polling unit all the way to the final result. So when you hear people talking about the 2027, don't only ask who is going to win. Ask another question too. Can I trust the process that produced the winner? Because at the end of the day, millions of Nigerians will vote, and every single one of those votes matters. What do you think? Is Nigeria's biggest problem the politicians or the system around the elections? Let me know what you think about this question in the comments, and make sure you like, you share this video, and subscribe for more daily updates.